What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Adobe Live. My name is Paco Siller, and I'm here with my friend Daniel Livingstone. Daniel, how goes it, my friend?
Going pretty good. I'm really excited because I have recently been doing like a deep dive into Lightroom. Normally, I'm a Lightroom Classic kind of guy, but Lightroom standalone has been really interesting to me because of mainly the community tab. And that's really what we're going to be diving into today, is exploring how you can use Lightroom not only as a tool to edit your own work, but also teach you how to improve, teach you new techniques and just give you a sense of what other people have going on in order to inform your own workflows.
Very well said, my friend. Ooh, threw a fancy transition there. First time being used. Came out pretty good, but yeah, very well said, my friend. I'm excited to get into this. If this is your first time on Photo Talk, this is the first time I'm bringing in a guest friend. So we got Daniel Livingstone. He is a fellow photographer and very, very talented in the editing world. He's been live with us before, so I'm very excited to have a guest spot for this. So yeah, without further ado, Daniel, what are we going to be jumping into today? Let's kind of get into the bulk of our content here.
Yeah, so I already have Lightroom fired up for us, and I can't remember exactly what screen it defaults to, but on the left side here you have a cloud tab and a local tab. I think typically users are going to be living in the local tab because that's the photos that you have imported into the software or photos that you have on your local drives. So a lot of people are going to see this, and this may be connected to their Lightroom catalog from Classic or their cloud catalog, but I have a couple images loaded in here that I brought in from my own hard drives, and I tried to stick with something that's pretty universal, nothing specific to me that is a little more relatable to a like international audience. So I just have a bunch of travel photos with me. So you're gonna be seeing stuff from all over the country. We got photos from Chicago, we got photos from Las Vegas, we got photos from Milwaukee, and then a little bit of stuff from Philadelphia, which is pretty cool.
Very cool. Yeah, you've kind of photographed all these different places, and you're kind of based out of the East Coast, right? So Milwaukee,
Midwest.
Philadelphia, Midwest. Okay, very cool. And I see a lot of
So I am
architecture
out
photography
of
there too.
Yes, I am out of Chicago. This is, for those of you who are familiar with the stuff that I'm normally doing, this is actually a little bit out of my wheelhouse. The primary stuff that I create is commercial lifestyle or active lifestyle photography that includes subjects like fitness, health, wellness, supplements, gyms, trainers, just anything that moves your body, anything that inspires a healthier lifestyle is my primary genre. However, in my free time, outside of work, outside of my clients, I love shooting architecture, street photography, travel stuff when I'm out of town. So anything that I just catches my eye when I'm roaming the streets of a new place that I'm in is what I really enjoy shooting as a hobby.
Yeah, very cool. I like the leading lines here. It's a giant corporate M, but it does phenomenal composition for this photo. It's very cool. Is this where
Yeah.
was this? This in Vegas? This has
This
Vegas
is in
vibes to me.
Vegas. So
Yeah.
earlier this year, I had the opportunity to go out to Vegas for a photography convention, and I made sure to dedicate one of my evenings to just walking the strip and doing some real old school street photography. Anything that catches my eye, anything that I find interesting or unique, I just had to take a photo of it. And came home with some really interesting images like this crazy McDonald's that I've never seen anything like this. And I made sure to go out during just before sunset to make sure I'm capturing that really nice, dreamy lighting. I kind of want my travel photos to feel like the memory that they are of the trip. So something warm, something kind of low inside lit, really helps bring out that emotion as opposed, or sorry, brings out the emotion as opposed to a high noon midday photo where the sun is just going straight down and you have a lot of like stark shadows and not a lot of vibrant color depth.
Yeah, I like it. All right, before we go any further, I do want to throw in some love to the chat. I see Cody, I see Oliver. Oliver
Oh yeah,
saying
what's up,
guest
guys?
and fancy transitions. We are being spoiled. Yes. Here on Adobe Live, we love to spoil you guys. So again, thank you for joining us. This Photo Talk, episode 7, I believe. We're kind of the community-centric photography show. So if you haven't already, feel free to join our Discord channel. There we have a Photo Talk channel. And we've been seeing some people there kind of share photo edits, kind of amping each other up. sharing some constructive criticism. So yeah, feel free to join us on Discord. Maybe the mods can put in the link to the Adobe Live Discord. And from there, we'll be on Photo Talk. But if you have any photos that you'd like to share, I always say feel free to put them in the chat, and then we can kind of spotlight them. I'll kind of work on the back end to show them. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us, everybody. I am here with Daniel Livingstone, again, if you're just joining us, and he is taking the spotlight here for this week's Photo Talk. And he's going to be showing us some photography and kind of showing us the community hub on Lightroom and different ways to edit our photos. Okay, cool. So that's a fun little recap. I'm going to give you back to Mike, Daniel, and yeah, so where are we going to take it from here?
So I say let's just start on this photo. I'll walk through a little bit
Okay.
of like how Lightroom works for those of you who are unfamiliar or maybe beginners. If you're fresh to Lightroom, all of your editing tools are going to be here in this tab called Edit. You can press the E key as a shortcut, and it gives you your light sliders, your curves, your color sliders, as well as a couple of effects details and optics settings you can dial in. I'm going to keep things pretty basic and pretty beginner friendly today. So we're already starting out with a properly exposed photo, which helps us a lot. I think I was just using manual settings, and I believe we can check that here. There is a metadata panel that I'm not used to opening. But at any rate, once we do the uploaded community stuff, it'll give us all that metadata information.
Oh,
I
that
found
might
it. It's the
be,
info button
yeah,
at the bottom
there it
right
is.
corner. So yeah, you can see here I was shooting with an R5, using a 24 to 70 millimeter f2.8 lens, and I was shooting in RAW. So we did 1/160th of a second, f5.6. I tried to keep my ISO low as always to make sure I'm getting the maximum quality out of my images without a ton of noise. And just, a standard handheld shutter speed and an aperture that gives me a little bit of sharpness and depth. I don't need to shoot crazy deep like f16 because I think this is perfectly fine. The focus is, when I was shooting this, the focus is obviously this McDonald's sign right here. This is obviously giving context, but not the focus of the image. I think it's just this sign and then this arch that leads you over here. But this area of the photo is kind of secondary, and this area of the photo is our primary. So in the editing tab, since we're already exposed pretty properly, I don't think I need to touch the exposure slider, but I will bring back some of these highlights because I think these whites in this area of this building, and maybe some of these whites on the sign are clipping a tad for my taste. So I want to bring that texture back into our scene, and just like
A
that,
question
we've
for you,
brought a lot of this
Daniel.
texture in. Yeah.
When you say we're already exposed properly, how are you verifying that? Are you eyeballing it, or you got a histogram there? Or
Right
what's
now
your
I'm
kind of
eyeballing
gauge?
it. I'm sure if we pulled up a histogram, it would sit pretty neatly in the middle. But when I reset this image to the raw, I can see there's tons of shadow detail in the darkest parts of this image. Even in this little like rooftop, it's pretty dark, but we can still see the texture in here. And then the highlights, usually the brightest thing in our photo is either going to be the sky or a bright white reflection. So I see that my sky is very well exposed, and that's a majority of what I'm basing this judgment on. Usually it's kind of difficult to balance out foreground and sky in some landscape images, so it's really good that we have all the detail and color information here in our subject, as well as this beautiful textured blue background with a little bit of clouds. So the brightest part of our image is probably this white paint reflection right here, and even then it's not completely clipped out, and that's why I'm going to use the highlights slider to just bring back some of that texture. And now we can see a little more detail in here. We can see a
That's
lot more detail in this building. I'll do before and after. So just getting all
yeah.
that back is really nice.
That's the beauty of shooting raw. All that info's there, so it's adjustable. You don't lose it forever.
So since we brought the highlights down, I was kind of trying to target these buildings, but we did lose a little bit of brightness in the sky, and I did miss how vibrant that sky was. So I'm going to jump straight to our mask tab, and there's a preset button right here for selecting the sky. So I'm going to grab that. It's going to think for a second, detecting that sky. And now we have a mask of our sky without any of the foreground in it. So this has done a fantastic job. It even grabbed this little bit of sky in here. So kudos to that. I'm going to bring those highlights back into the sky. And just for an extra enhancement, I'm probably going to pump a little extra saturation because I want that sky to pop.
Nice. Yeah, it's good contrast with the yellow, red, and blue there.
Yeah, our primaries are really doing their thing. Speaking of those
I know.
primaries, I'm going to push that even further in the vibrance slider. So I'm going to bring that up, and that really brought some more of our sky back, maybe even a little bit too much. So I can go back to our mask and bring the saturation of our sky back down. And I'll maybe pump a little extra white in it to make sure it's still brighter than our foreground. Because I noticed that photographers sometimes when they're doing lots of dynamic range stuff, maybe even some HDR things, or just trying to maximize what they can pull out of a photo's exposure, they'll typically pull the highlights all the way down, they'll pull the shadows all the way up, but that can lead to some negative effects where the sky is darker than other things in your scene, and our natural eye just finds that strange, and it feels a little uncanny sometimes. So making sure that we're balancing out the exposures of different elements in our image to match that realism or match what we're used to is really important in keeping a photo feeling good or feeling right.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think naturally a lot of people like slide highlights left, shadows right, because you want to bring out all that dynamic range in a photo. But yeah, I mean, sometimes if the sky's darker than the foreground, something just looks off, right? So very good point to keep in mind when you're shooting landscapes, or just honestly anything with a sky in it. Is just make sure it's got that balance, right? It doesn't look too unreal.
So I'm going to close the curves tab. I don't want to get too into curves because it can be kind of intimidating and complex for some people. Um, I'm sure we'll come out with some tutorials in the near future about diving deep into the curves tool, but I have found that one of Lightroom's relatively newer features called color grading makes this process so much simpler. So I'm going to go straight to the highlights. And like I said, I want to go for a dreamy kind of nostalgic look to capture the memory of what it felt like to be on this trip, to be on vacation. So I am going to go to my highlights tab. I'm going to change this wheel to the warmer tones, somewhere between yellow and red, kind of this orange area. And I'm going to pull this slider up and just pump a little bit of like orange yellow into these highlights. Now that, since I shot it at sunset, really pumps that like warm sunset lighting into my frame. It makes it feel a lot more dreamy already.
Yeah, that before and after, you could definitely see the change there.
And to use a little bit of color theory since we're going about our mindset when editing and talking through these edits, if I'm pumping a warm tone into the highlight, sometimes I like to split tone using color theory. So I'll go to the opposite end of the color wheel and I'll pump in a little bit of blue into the shadow. Not too much to distract, but it helps just kind of push that contrast even further where we're separating our highlights, we're separating our shadows. Instead of just using the contrast slider, we're actually using colors to enhance the contrast of our image and give it that extra pop.
That's good. And for those of us who are the people in the chat who may not know what split toning is, can you kind of just give like a one-liner of what that's actually doing?
Yeah, it's essentially taking your 50% middle gray point, and everything above 50% gray or middle gray is going to be one color. Everything below that point is going to be another color, and you can kind of dial them into whatever colors you want to do that kind of tinting. But usually, if you
Right.
use two opposite colors, complementary colors, also known as, it just gives your photo a very artistic look that is not necessarily natural or super realistic, but has the opportunity to give you a ton of artistic expression.
Very well said. Yeah, definitely gives us more tools to kind of be more creative with our editing. So very cool.
So another interesting feature is this point color tab, and this is also a newer thing. Since these windows are like this deep cyan, but differently blue tinted than the sky, I kind of want to match it so that this reflection feels more accurate to the sky we have. So instead of trying to dig around in the color mixer tab and figuring out what this is, I can just use an eyedropper on that. It grabs me this exact shade, and now I can hue shift this and kind of match that up with our sky a little better. And I think that's pretty good. So yeah, we've gone from that to that, and that helps out a lot. So through a couple of very simple modifications, I think the last thing I want to do is, like I said, I'm going for a warmer, dreamier look. So I'm going to change the temperature, and we're able to do this with the full range of the slider because we shot in that raw format. So if you were in JPEG, you have a lot less tolerance with this temperature and tint slider, but in RAW, you can kind of take it all the way to the max if you wanted to without degrading the image quality. So I'm going to push this a little farther to the warm point, maybe about here.
Yeah,
And
it's like
this
a
gives
lot
us
more
a
sunsetty.
very sunset, almost like a
Mm-hmm.
Western feel, which I feel like is kind of appropriate since we're on the West Coast in Vegas. And this is a majority of what I feel like needs to be done to this image in terms of processing exposure, light, and color tabs. I always have a personal trick that I like to do in the effects tab. I throw a vignette on almost every single photo I do. So I'm going to bring that vignette slider down a little bit. And then there's a further little hidden drop-down menu here for bonus features. I'm going to bring the midpoint in, roundness max that out, feather almost max that out, because I want a very subtle gradation of dark into the edges of my frames. And then I can adjust the ultimate vignette slider, just kind of dial in that little bit of focus. And now our eye goes a lot more towards this McDonald's sign. If I
Yeah,
want
let's
to
see that
push
before and let's see that before and after that vignette. I love me a good vignette too. I think it does a lot. Yeah, it's subtle, but it definitely guides your eyes a little bit more towards the focal points you're shooting for.
It's also helping us with a little bit more highlight recovery on the edges of the frame with this
Mm-hmm.
sign and this building over here. That's just kind of like a bonus perk, because if you're clipping any highlights, it helps dial that back too. And that's why I always like pushing these feathering and roundness sliders to the
Right.
max, because I like doing these things very subtly.
Super cool. Love us some bonus perks.
So I have some chat questions here. Kane from Behance says, ever use black and white in your workflow? Normally, no, but within the past, I would say like 3 months, I've been getting really into black and white stuff. And we're going to touch on some black and whites in this editing session, but I am finally starting to recognize the beauty and the value in doing black and white, especially when you're straight out of camera shot is pristine and your subject matter is interesting and important. I think that's when black and white really, really shines. We also have another question from Kane as well, saying any tips for fixing high grain photos due to ISO 6400 and very low lighting? A lot of what you're going to be looking for is under this detail tab, and this exists in both Lightroom and Lightroom Classic. So this denoise reduction will create a new
Yes.
DNG using AI to fix noise in your image. But if you want to do it manually without AI tools, there's this drop down here for manual noise reduction. These sliders are also pretty powerful, and I would suggest playing with these, looking at your images at 100, 200% zoom, and just really dialing in these features to fix noise. But I do use these on shoots where I have to go ISO 6400 and above.
Yeah, that AID noise feature is pretty nuts. That hasn't always been around in Lightroom. It's more recent in the last couple updates. And yeah, I mean, I remember, I used to shoot with a Canon T3i, and obviously the noise isn't that great because we're not talking full frame. So I've actually gone back and retroactively looked at what that denoise filter can do with noisy images, and it's pretty impressive. You do need to shoot RAW. It's not going to work on JPEG, but it needs to be a RAW file, and it'll turn it into a DNG, and it does some pretty cool stuff. So, Kane, great question. I would definitely look into that denoise feature. Just make sure you are shooting in the RAW format because it's not going to do it with JPEGs.
100%. The last thing I'm going to do with this photo is we did our vignette. I'm going to do what I call a reverse vignette, where I kind of take a radial gradient from the center of the
Yeah.
image and then make it brighter instead of darker. And
Mm-hmm.
that kind of works in tandem where it's pushing your focus straight to the thing that you want to. So I've done a radial gradient here over the McDonald's sign since this is the focus. But I don't want this radial gradient hitting the sky too much, and I don't want to be able to see the masks that I'm creating. So I'm going to subtract the sky from this mask. And now our mask should solely be on the subject here. And it is doing a great job of masking that out. And if I max this out, you can see this is exactly what our mask is.
Uh-huh.
So this is exactly what I'm going for. I'm just going to pump a little bit of interest, and by interest, I mean whites, into that sign right there and just draw your focus in that extra little bit.
Very cool. We have very similar workflows, my friend. I do a lot of that opposite radial gradients where I'll do some vignette and then I'll pop it. And then actually I do the subtract sky a ton too. I used to have to brush it out pre
Hmm.
AI targeting. But yeah, you could just do it all in a couple clicks. Lightroom's just making our lives so much easier.
So this is our before and this is our after, and I feel like we've done a successful job of
Hmm.
accomplishing that dreamy, nostalgic look we were going for, by only modifying a handful of sliders. We did some stuff in the light tab, we did a little bit in the color tab. We made great use of color grading and just vignetting with a touch of masking on top of it. So we only did essentially two masks, a sky mask and a radial mask. And that's as simple as this edit really needs to be.
Yeah, very cool. This came out great.
So now that that's done, I want to transition into our community tab. So what I can do is click the share button at the top right corner, and I swear it was just here. At the bottom should be a share to cloud option. I just did it with another test edit right before stream.
Can you, yeah, let me see what it says. JPEG, previous setting. Oh, go to try export. I think export, once you click on export, you might be able to see the option. Let's see. Where is it? Oh yeah, yours isn't showing up. Weird. Let me see if I can recreate it on my end and see what's going on. There might be a setting you don't have enabled.
At any rate, I
But
just did this with another photo that I edited before stream, and it was this photo. So if you go to the community tab, you will be able to find
Mhm.
this photo under my profile. You can see the edits that I made to it, and you have the option of remixing it. And I think this is the biggest thing. So
Can you share
in
that link with
the,
us, Daniel? So
yeah,
if you, yeah, go to the photo and then you can, I believe, yeah, click on that share button. Yeah, right next to the heart, and then copy that link.
okay,
And then if you want to send that to me, then I can send it to the mod so that people can have access to that. You can either do it in the Zoom chat,
okay.
which I think you might have just done, or you could just send it to me on Slack. Let's see. Are you sending it on Zoom or Slack?
Zoom.
Okay, cool.
So share,
Yeah, and then just so you
copy.
know, friends, what we're doing right now is
There we go.
that photo that Daniel has, I'm going to share it to the chat. So if you have Lightroom open, you can open it right now and then remix his photo. And then if you do remix it, you can let us know in the chat, and then we will go over it and kind of see the real-time remixes that are done. We got about 35-ish minutes, so feel free to remix it. Let us know in the chat, and then we'll spotlight your remix on this live stream if we have time.
I'm gonna put one more attempt into getting that McDonald's photo into the community tab because I would love to see what people do to it based on what we were just talking about. Update edits to cloud. Maybe I have to do that first.
Cool. I'm just sending over
Strange.
this link so we can get it clickable in our chat.
I don't suppose there's any like limit to how many images you can add to the community tab, is there?
No, not that I'm aware of. Let me see. So yeah, usually you hit that top right button,
Oh,
and
share
then
your
there's a
edit.
community option that says share
Open
to the
recent
community.
edits.
But
Oh, so Lightroom's actually walking me through this on its own. That's cool.
okay,
Oh, there we go. Okay.
maybe you have
Select
to
the
do it through recent
photo, an edited
edits.
photo you like to
Yeah,
share to community. Click on that one. Open the share.
yeah,
There it
yeah.
is.
Share to
It's
the
back.
community. Okay,
Oh, I can't share to the community from the edit panel. I have to be in the gallery tab to do it.
cool. There you have it, folks.
Okay.
Unable to let's see.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Run that back one more time.
Oh, you might have to give it. I think you got to give it a title and description real quick.
I'm trying, but I don't think I'm clicking.
No, you gotta give it a title before you share. So it's not gonna let you share until you type, yeah, right there, title. So go ahead and type something in, and then you should be able to share.
It's kicking me out before it does
Let's see,
anything. Oh, it
share
looks
and
like
then
it's not rendering the edits. Oh, I think because I clicked update to cloud, so it's still waiting for the cloud to update that metadata. We'll come back to sharing that in a minute
okay.
while I go through the community tab. So in the community tab, not just my photos, but anyone is an Adobe user who can share their images. And we can scroll through tons of stuff. It even gives us tons of filters that we can do based on genre. So if you're more of a food photographer, there are plenty of options here in the food tab. If you're more of a landscape person, I'm sure there are tons of landscapes that you can pick from. Hey, look, another McDonald's shot.
Hey, that's pretty funny.
And the way that I use this community tab is I just kind of scroll and scroll until I find an image. Oh, there's my shot from Philadelphia. So I just scroll through these and I just look for an image that just really pops out to me. Something that just stands out that I'm like, I love that edit. I need to know how it was made. And I want to give a crack at it because it's just such a great photo. So the first one then this tab, honestly, this flower photo and this flower photo really jump out at me. And when you hover over it with your cursor, it'll show you the raw image. So you can see the before and after pretty quickly about what they did, how they did it, and then decide for yourself if you want to take a stab at it. So I like this shot. I'm going to click on this. And one of the coolest things about this that I think is so genius is you can play out the edits as a video. So if I click play on the image, it walks me through on the right side every single step that they took. And it does it at a very reasonable pace that doesn't make me like have to pause and replay it over and over again and be like, oh, what they did, what they do. It's very straightforward and gives me a really good sense of where their head was at, why they're making the decisions they're making. And you can manually scroll through and jump to any of these steps you want. So first, as shot raw photo, what they do to the exposure. And I can go back and forth and go, okay, they just lifted it a little bit, did some contrast, did some highlight recovery. And I find that the biggest jumps, if there's any curve adjustments, is where you see the biggest jump, as well as these color mix ones. So if I go from beginning of color mix to end of color mix, you'll see the photo changes dramatically. And this is a great educational tool because I'm learning, okay, color mix is really where I'm going to take the photo, this huge leap into my artistic expression, or the curves are where I'm going to be able to take the photo from photorealistic or snapshotty to a work of true art. So these are all great, unintentional educational tools. This is where I'm really going to learn the breakdown of how to edit. And I'm so glad Adobe added this because I think back in the early days of like Instagram, people used to be really gatekeepy. People used to be really secretive about editing techniques, post-processing techniques. I know it took me years to even figure out how to do matted blacks by crushing the curves. But this community tab really opens the door for people to just learn at an exponential rate and no longer gatekeeps the secrets of how to do photography. And I think that's so important to allow us all as artists to grow.
Yeah, that's a good point. I do feel like Instagram was pretty gatekeepy kind of in the beginning days, when it was photo only and photography was everything. But yeah, I think those days are just long and gone because there's so many photographers I would argue now uploading photos than they were back in like 2012 or 13 when Insta came out. But this is just a great hub for inspiration. I mean, just so many ways to edit one photo.
So I clicked on remix it. So now I have the opportunity to take my spin on, I believe it was Tatiana's photo. So thank you to Tatiana Ju
Yeah,
or
shout out to
you.
Tatiana. Yeah, I think we're saying it right.
Thank you for sharing this photo to the community. I think this is a fantastic shot and it really caught my attention. So I am going to just jump right in and do what I think I would want to do to this photo. So I'm going to pump the exposure. I like the brightness. I like the contrast already. I'm actually going to bring the contrast down a little bit to lift some of these shadows back here. And I'm already pumping the shadows pretty high. Some whites would be cool. And she went for, I believe, a warmer look. I think I'm going to go with a cooler, maybe blue-green tinted look on this. And I want to max out that brightness without losing any details. So I'm going to bring up the vibrance as I like to do. I'm actually going to bring up the vibrance pretty high. And I'm going to go back and forth between lifting highlights and vibrance because I want a really good color of bright whites, but lots of color data. And those can sometimes be in conflict with one another. Jumping down to the color mixer tab. The greens are actually pretty nice. I like the shade of green. I suspect this may have been photographed with a Nikon camera just because of the like green tint of it. I think I have a good gauge of like camera profiles. And I believe once we
Interesting.
finish this edit, I'll be able to find that out because the metadata is included in the image.
Okay, so you would say Nikons in generally tend to have a little bit of a green hue to them?
Yeah, Nikon sensors are known for having an like greater depth of green tints, and that's why Nikons for the longest time, especially in the DSLR era, were so popular amongst landscape photographers. You'd be hard pressed to find a Nat Geo photographer that didn't have a Nikon D3, 4, or 5.
Very cool. Fun fact. I
So
did not know that.
let's wiggle these greens around. And honestly, I think I like exactly where they're at. Maybe pump a little extra saturation, maybe some lightness just to make the plants come alive a little more. And I believe this is, yeah, the magentas. I'm going to lift the magentas on these flowers. I'm not a botanist. I actually don't know what flower this is. Any flower experts in the chat, please tell me exactly what flower this is.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you. My partner is super big into plants. You could probably look that and tell us, but I'm with you. Help us chat. Let us know if you know what type of flower this is. Looks nice and fuzzy though. Bet it smells awesome.
And then reds. I see a little bit of red. I'm gonna right here in the middle of the shot. I actually like it. Orange looks good. I'm not gonna try to like turn it into a plant that doesn't exist. I'm really just trying to enhance the natural features of it.
So we got some people in the chat saying cherry blossom. Cody saying a lilac. Maybe it's a lilac.
That sounds,
Let's see.
you know what? I'm not even
Sounds
gonna
about
attempt to
right.
try to make a judgment.
I'm gonna Google what that actually. I googled lilac. That looks lilac-y.
I'm gonna
So
stick to being good at photography and not plants. That's what I've chosen to do with my life. I'm gonna push the focus back onto this one flower right here. So I'm gonna do a linear gradient from the bottom and kind of darken that. I'm also gonna bring down the highlights and the whites of that to just do like a softer matted darkness. Another mask for radial gradient to bring my attention right where I want it, which is right here.
Oliver saying Cody is correct. All right, I think the chat has spoken. I think we have a lilac here. So
And then
thanks
I
for
might
letting us
even be
know.
able to do a fake flare coming in. And let's see. It looks like the direction of the sun from this highlight and shadow over here is coming from the right. So I'm going to do a big, big, big gradient from the right. Make this gigantic. And then I'm going to go into our effects tab, the dehaze slider. Now, normally people use dehaze to bring back images that have too much flare in them and bring back that contrast. Sometimes I use it in the opposite way where I'll pull that slider to the left and I'll add haze to the image and create a fake flare, which really sells the effect if I punch a bunch of warmth into it and some highlight. Maybe too much dehaze, maybe a little less. There we go. Just a subtle, something that catch your eye. And then do some yellow point curve in here to tint that up. Something that had like a warm glow over here. Now, I think since this is a image of a flower close up and it's very beautiful, I want something dreamy. So I'm gonna bring clarity down a little bit, especially, sorry, outside of my mask. Back to editing, global edits. So inside of effects, clarity, I'm gonna bring that down just a touch. In fact, to do this more creatively, go back to masks. I'm going to do another radial gradient around my subject. I'm going to invert that mask. Now it's everything but my flower. Then I'm going to lower the clarity of that. And that makes everything around it dreamy, kind of shifting focus. It's like a tilt shift effect, like slash fake Orton effect. But we're just doing this with a couple masks and sliders inside of Lightroom. So now our attention goes here. Everything's a little more softly out of focus. And I think just balancing out the exposure, it feels dark up here. And the top of the images usually shouldn't be that dark, especially if there's sky visible, like we talked about in our earlier edit. So I'm going to do another radial up here. Maybe just lift some whites, lift some highlights. Shadows. Yeah, shadows is good. tinge of exposure without clipping those whites. And I think this is where we want to live. So we've gone from this to before and after. I think this is lovely. I can also change the crop a little bit. I feel like there's a little bit too much negative space on the left here. Maybe too much negative space on the bottom here. And I do like keeping a aspect ratio locked in. So let's do an Instagram crop. Let's do a 4:5. If I was gonna post this on Instagram, I would probably set it up like this.
Very cool.
So I'm pretty happy about that.
Are you able to get the link to that? I'd like to post that in the chat too, in case people want to have their own take on that.
Yeah.
If not, I can find it.
So if I click next, a little bit of my thought process. So I can explain the rationale behind my edit, and I think this is pretty cool too, as like I said, that educational inspiration. So I can say I wanted to highlight the rich green and blue colors in the original photo. I also reduced clarity for a dreamy effect. I used a few masks to really pull the focus toward the subject of the photo.
Nice.
Post. So now my remix is available. So now you can go in and break down all of my sliders and edits for this image. Share.
Cool. Yeah, and then hit that share
copy.
button. Yeah, and then go ahead and send it to me, and then I will post it in the chat as well. So now you got 2 photos, chat. If you want to either do the McDonald's photo edit, or no, I don't think that one did it. It was another architecture one that you shared, or this dreamy lilac that I think we decided it is, thanks to the chat. Let's see, did you send me that one? Yep. Cool, I got it.
Curious if there's also a send to community tab in the right click. There is, and it's grayed out for some reason. I'm not sure why. And I think it's because I may have like conflicting metadata with this photo from my Lightroom catalog. But that's okay. We'll do, we have it with this photo. And actually I saw when I was in the community tab, which is kind of interesting. I uploaded that image right before we went live on this. And if I go to my profile, I can see everything that I've edited. I can also see all the things that I've remixed in the past. So under my edits, I can see there's already 3 different edits that people have done on this image.
Oh, okay, cool. Is this, would you say this is recently in the last 30 minutes or at some point before the live stream? Because that might be friends actually.
One of these was uploaded right before we went. So the image itself, the original, was uploaded right before we went live today because I was doing a test run. I saw that one person had edited it right at the beginning of stream, so they might have just found it coincidentally on the community tab and just done it on their own. 2 of these are fresh and have been added since we started the flower photo.
Yeah, let's check them out.
So we got a rendition from PR.
Oh, Apurva. Yeah, he's in the chat. Apurva, thank you so much for editing this. Cool. Let's have a look at what Apurva did. I know he's been active in our chat.
Play through there. So we have an exposure increase, a contrast increase, highlight recovery, shallow recovery, whites reduction, black boost, lots of curve action, white balancing, vibrance and saturation. Ooh, and then it gets even deeper into a little bit of color mixing, a little bit of color grading. It looks like they're doing some split toning action that we talked about earlier.
Bring it full circle here. I like it.
Got some blue in the shadows, got some yellow in the highlights, so going for that opposite effect, and we can see that here. This, I think, is a really good example of split toning, where we see the building has blue and red tones, opposite colors, but they're existing in the same space and creating that contrast, which gives us the shape of the building. So done mostly on instinct, the explanation. Tried color grading with what I understood of split tone grading. There we go. Did highlights towards an orangish and shadows towards bluish. Thanks. Thank you for that amazing explanation.
Yeah, thanks, Apurva. And thanks for kind of writing out what you did. It looks very cool. sticking with the dreamy subject that we're doing. I like it. I like the color grading too.
So we
Very
have
cool
another
stuff.
version from Kane, who is in our chat as well. And he said, just using
Kane.
the
Yeah, that's
basic panel to edit this photo in black and white. And we look through the edits here. So we have original, a black and white conversion, and then it looks like just a lot of light adjustments with contrast, uh, highlight recovery, shadow recovery, boosting the whites, boosting the blacks, color calibration, and then some clarity, dehaze, and vignette. So good use of the dehaze slider. I think this shot is a little hazy or a little low contrast. It was really like humid and kind of muggy that day, I remember. So we're probably losing a little bit of clarity on those trees and those buildings in the distance. I see that we have a lot of recovery in the sky, which is really cool. I don't even think it was a sky replacement. I think it is just using the actual tones in the sky or the information from the raw file. Because yeah, that dehaze brought back all this detail, which I didn't even realize was there, honestly. My edit was a little flatter and a little less contrast. I even pumped some haze into the sky to make it kind of foggy. So two very different directions you can go with this image, but I think both are really, really cool.
Yeah, and that's the beautiful thing about the remix tab. I mean, there's just so many different ways to do it. Like I agree, this
Oh,
kind of looks hazy. Almost looks like Mexico City, honestly. Like it's giving me those vibes. And then we got the black and white where you get a lot of contrast in the sky. So very cool. Thanks, Kane. Thanks a lot for submitting. I like that as you did, the black and white take. All right,
and then
what's
we
that
have
last
another
one we got?
variant by
Henning.
Henning B.
Okay.
And there wasn't an explanation. I think they were just editing for fun, not necessarily like working super hard in trying to like teach the community. But you don't have to, and that's pretty cool. It's like you can just do this for fun. You can just do this for vibes, essentially. So
For
let's walk
vibes.
through this. We've got contrast lower, highlight recovery, white recovery, black recovery, tone curve, and then a lot of color mixing, which goes into a little bit of very light color grading. And then clarity, they're using the grain tab on this one. So that's something we didn't actually touch on yet, is the grain effect and then some reduced sharpening. So I think they're going for a very analog film vibe, which is interesting. And I do feel that, especially with the grain, that's really cool. Let me go back to their final. So the grain really adds a lot, makes it kind of feel like a Polaroid almost, like a proper like travel photo. I think that helps with the nostalgic feature. So I really like what they did with this. Also, the color grading step really took it to that point. I think they did a fantastic job, very subtly pumping in tones that feel natural and still feel artistic and intentional without degrading the image in any way. And then for their color mixing, they worked on every single color, which I think is pretty
Yeah.
impressive. So they added red, added orange, added yellow, but then shifted yellow to orange to make those trees appear a little more autumnal. And then the greens, they desaturated. So they wanted the focus to be a little less on the trees and a little more about, I think, our monument and our sky. The blues got shifted to be cooler and darker. Yeah, I think they're pushing the attention right up here and then a little away from here. And then that color grading, bam, just
Yeah.
slaps it all together. So good. Fantastic job.
Very cool. Thank you, Henning B. If you're watching, I don't know if you did it because you're watching the live stream or you did it on a whim, but if you are watching, you got featured, and this is pretty cool. Go.
Yeah.
Can you go back to the vibrance slider? I wanna see the difference at the. Yeah. Okay. So this is before they applied all the color
It's pretty
mixing, and then
subtle. They only did 10 points of vibrance. And not only can I see what they did or like what tools they used, I can see the exact levels of everything they did. 24
yeah,
points of contrast, 21 points of highlights. It's really intricate what I can see people doing here.
yeah, and it's
And
it's cool to see from the vibrance slider just to see like all the difference that color mixing did. I mean, you can see vibrance; it's subtle, but when you go to the color mixer, I mean that added so much to the last photo, Henning Bees,
yeah.
that one. Yeah, so just from vibrance and then jumping to after all the color mixes were applied, I mean, that did a lot for that panel, and that's pretty cool to see how much of a difference it does just by messing with the color mixer. So very, very cool.
So another thing about the community tab that I find really helpful, and the reason that I was really excited about it not being gatekeepy is because not only can you see how people are editing, you can copy those settings if you really wanted to go and just dial it in yourself and copy and paste or match those all the numbers typing in manually. But another thing you can do is you can literally just save it as a preset right there in the window. You can just look at an image and say, I like the way that looks before and after. Maybe I shot a pizza shot that I think could use some brightness and some color and some cool stuff. I can just save this as a preset right into my Lightroom library. I like this this black and white shot is pretty cool. I'm gonna save that as a preset. And then I can title it over I want. I can title it LR Community B&W. Group, save from community, so it's creating that tab. And I can choose as many or as few settings as they did as I want. I can save that. And let's go back to my images. Let's go to what's something else? Do this seat of this chair shot I have. And if I go into my presets tab, I have in my save from community this black and white one that we just saved from someone else's shot. And it just puts all the same settings I used on their photo onto my photo. And this is, I think, the pinnacle of the community tab is people just openly sharing and freely sharing what they're doing, not hiding things, not being secretive, and just saying, if this looks good to you, I want you to use it. I want you to improve your photos based on what I did.
Very cool. We have a purpose saying, thank you all. Tried what I could. Kane saying, thanks so much, guys. Yeah, thank you for submitting all. That's very cool. Quick time check, Dana. We got about less than 10 minutes. If we maybe wanted to do one more remix, I'll keep an eye out on those remixes, see if we get any last edits trickling in so we can highlight them. I love kind of seeing the real-time edits that people do on Photo Talk. But yeah, we got a little bit of time to kill.
Okay, and I'm gonna do everything I can off stream to make sure I get that McDonald's photo uploaded to the community tab. So
Okay, right on.
stick with me, follow me on just go to my profile, find me on Behance, find me on the Lightroom community tab. It will appear here in my edits, and you can save that as a preset. You can copy all my settings. Feel free to do whatever you want if it helps you. I do like this piece of shot. Let's jump into this one. I thought this was really cool. And it looks like they already have a ton of remixes to this, but the original really caught my eye because I think everything is lit so nicely and so
Yeah.
intricately. And when I went to
Great
go check the
composition,
original
too.
raw, it was actually super dark and super flat to start.
Yeah.
So we have a massive leap of before and after here. And this is .raf, which I think is Fujifilm's raw format. So we got exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, whites, blacks. We have a curve tab, which just pumps a lot more contrast in.
Yeah.
We have our color tab, which I think brings this really to life in from this to this. We have our color mixing, which takes us here. Color grading, which pushes us a little darker. Some effects tabs. And then I think where this image really goes crazy is the mask. And you can say they have a little bit of remove tools. So they did some cleanup here. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different masks that we can open up, look at the settings of each individual mask. We can see the actual like overlay of the mask itself. And then it takes us from here to here, which is a dramatic jump. And I think this
That's
was the
big.
biggest deal, was this to
Yeah.
this was amazing. Just from looking at the before and after, you can kind of get a really good idea of what they were doing. So they ultimately made the bottom darker. I'm sure they wanted to hide these little distractions in the table since this is not what the shot is about, as well as bring some extra flair and some directionality of their light coming from top left down to bottom right to sell this vignette, to sell the lighting of the image, and to make each of the, I think they did a mask for each pizza, which was cool. So it's like pizza, the wine, pizza, 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 which I thought was hilarious. Is like each of them needed their own individual highlight recovery. So I'm gonna remix this and attempt my own edit on this. And what's kind of cool is that I can edit this from scratch, or I can come in and use my own presets on this from my own library, as well as the ones that we saved from the community tab. So if I like an edit on one shot from community, I can go in a completely different community shot and bring that edit to that one. So now we're like kind of cross-pollinating the edits of the community and the images of the community together, going, I'll take this edit and this shot and this workflow and this thing, and I'll just cross them all together and combine and make a bunch of really cool stuff that uh, never would have been made otherwise. So I'm just looking at my own presets, and I have some interesting. A lot of my personal presets don't have any light adjustments applied to them since all images are kind of shot differently in different lighting settings. But I'm going to start with this one because I think I like the warm color processing I have here. I'm going to close my presets, and then I'll start with some scratch manual adjustments. So I'll bring up the exposure for sure because I think this was exposed a little bit, underexposed a little bit. I'll bring down the contrast a tad. Some of these shadows can come up. I definitely need to pump some whites because I'm losing a lot of that white point contrast. Lift the shadows a little bit. Bring the blacks down for contrast. Maybe even a little extra exposure without clipping those whites too harshly. I think this is good. And then I think masking is going to be the next big thing. So this is our before and after, just using like one of my presets and then a little bit of manual adjustments in the light tab. I think we could do some masking. I'm going to do my own manual vignette because I want it to be shaped a little weird. So I'm going to do kind of like an egg shape, and I'm going to have it coming off the top. And then I have to reverse this because I want it to hit the bottom of this frame, but in kind of like a rounded way. Rotate that. So I want it to come in from the left, swoop down, and come off to the right. Play with the feathering as well. And then I'll just bring that exposure down a little bit to distract from that. So now it looks like there was a spotlight on my table instead of a even sunlight hitting everything. So now our lighting is a lot more directed. It feels more professional. After that, I'm going to actually take one after the original photographer, who is Silimkan, and do a radial gradient on just this pizza because I think it deserves its own highlight recovery. So bring the highlights back on that, and there we go. We get those details back, which is great. I'm also gonna try to match their kind of mindset by adding that radial gradient from the top, pumping a bunch of whites, pumping a bunch of warmth. So I can use a similar technique to another artist in the community tab without directly copying what they're doing. And it's just kind of putting my own spin on it. So the way I do it is I like bringing down some dehaze. I like pumping some warmth. I like messing with the color curves a little bit for that color. Same with my reverse, or for my proper vignette, my egg vignette, is I can pump some like blue into that, or maybe even like some cooler tones. And overall, I think this is where I would leave the image. I'm not going to change the cropping too much because I think it makes for an easier comparison between mine and their edit. But feel free if you want to get really creative with the composition. Maybe you would come in and I'm going to do a 5x7 crop. Maybe I want to go horizontal with it. Maybe I want just the pizza. Maybe I even want to cut out the bottom of the frame and make it this. You know, that's still an engaging shot. I think that's a really fun composition. But I'm going to reset the crop. And I think
great.
This is complete.
Pizza shooting color.
Vibe.
Let's see. So went up for warm vibe, pumped up brightness near pizzas, and darkened the edges of the frame for focus. Nice. Looking good. Yeah, this came out great, Daniel.
So that's my take, but I'm also really curious to see what other people are doing. So this is the original. My version is uploading. And then here are a couple other variants. So this person went for a much cooler look on theirs.
Really emphasize the greens.
This person went for a more like darker green feel. I think they were kind of feeling inspired from the plants that are surrounding and the environment. Their description was pizza with a bunch of A's. Yeah. This one is a little more natural, true to the original RAW. So all they did was change exposure and shadows, and they thought that that was all it needed. So they're just giving mad respect to the photographer for getting it right out of camera. This one has a more like deep, darker orange cyan look, or a muted tone look. Some of these are a little darker, but they thought that they wanted to improve on texture clarity and vignetting, give it more of like a dramatic scene. This one feels kind of similar
I
to what
like
I
that
did.
one. Yeah.
It has a little bit brighter of a highlight tone than mine, but it looks like we were kind of going in the same direction.
Yeah. This one's pretty cool. A lot of emphasis in the middle too.
And I think what's really separating my edit from this one, even though they look so similar, is that in this edit, they decided not to do any masking. And in my edit, I went a little more specific with the masking. So I did kind of a warm, muted, uh, low contrast profile with a little bit of light shaping.
Very
And
cool.
now that
All
I'm
right,
looking
Daniel.
at other people's edits, I think already seeing the ways that I can improve my own. So
Yeah.
I'm definitely gonna maybe go back and revise that in the future.
Very cool. Well, that's going to put us at time. So thank you everybody for tuning in to this week's episode of Photo Talk, guesting Daniel Livingstone. Don't go anywhere because we have the creative challenges coming up with Chris Porter, followed by 3 more creative challenges, and then social media takeover from 2 to 3 p.m. So lots of fun stuff going on Adobe Live for the rest of the day. Thanks so much for joining us, Daniel. We'll see you all in the next one, and stay tuned.
Thanks,
See you
guys.
later.